Hi everybody. My name's Boughton, and I'm very happy to be here contributing to the body of knowledge and the resources available to DLC members. And I thank DLC very much indeed for this opportunity to engage and be part of the community. I'm an honorary member of DLC Wines, Cigars and Spirits committee in the Dubai chapter. I'm an experienced fine wine buyer and marketeer, and I'm currently senior category manager for fine wines for MMI. MMI is the leading importer and distributor of fine wines in the GCC, with operations in the Indian Ocean as well and beyond. My task today is to talk about fine wine, to help you guys understand what sets fine wine apart from regular wine. And the challenge that I've set myself here is to talk about fine wine in 5 minutes, to give you guys the tools to understand some of the key concepts that make up the definition of fine wine and why it's different to regular wine. So fine wine is a luxury product made with artisanal craftsmanship that has the capacity for organoleptic improvement with time and an active secondary market. The trouble is that there is no legal definition of fine wine, and it's a term that's used to refer to very different types of wine depending on the situation, depending on whether it's a consumer or a producer or a marketeer that's using the term. It's a pretty relative concept. People will generally refer to fine wines as being the wines within their portfolio that are a little bit more expensive than the others. They may refer to the percentage of wines that they think are better than the bulk of their portfolio or of their offering, or compared to what they normally drink. If you drink a bottle of wine that costs €5, if you splash out and spend €25, you'll be into probably your territory of fine wine. For some people, €25 is the entry level, and they're lucky enough to be able to spend €250 or more on a bottle of wine. So it's a challenging relative concept with some subjective judgment in there. But there's been a lot of writing about it. It's a term that's used a lot, so I think it's pretty important for us to understand it and to be able to talk with a little authority about it. So I guess this is relevant whether you are starting to learn about wine, setting up a restaurant, managing an investment portfolio, filling up your own cellar, a private cellar or that of a customer, or thumbing through a wine list in a restaurant or a bar. It's pretty helpful to try and understand this concept of what is fine wine. I guess with wine, there's always a simple answer, an incredibly complicated way of getting there. But let's try and plow through and understand what makes fine wine. So the contributing factors, I think, span from production and from regulation and from the marketing angle. So if we think about fine wine needs to have heritage to the site that it is from, be that a long history or a marketing spin that's captured something that's unique about that site. Beyond that, it's about the quality of the raw material, the climate and exposure of the vineyard in question, the synergy of the grape variety and the soil type, the appropriate yield, and the careful and responsible vineyard management by the vigneron. I think any definition needs to consider sustainability and needs to consider regenerative farming practices. The skill of the winemaker and the tools at his or her disposal really play a significant part here in communicating the quality of that raw material. Wines need to be made with care, attention, and a respect for their environment, despite the risks that level of respect can have. If you're farming organically or biodynamically, you may run the risk of losing yield, of losing profitability. So there's significant risk involved there, but I think it is a responsible and important part of contributing towards a fine wine. The nature of the story of the people behind the winemaker, the owners, the owning family, the founding fathers of a vineyard or of a producer are important. And this builds the spirit of a fine wine. And I think the spirit of a fine wine is a wine that communicates the essence and cultural heritage of its region. But these concepts are a long way from being finite. It's all quite waffly, everything I've just said. Obviously, it refers to intrinsic quality, but I think we can go further into quality. We can go further into what we could use to define fine wine, and then see how important those factors are. So let's look at the concepts of quality, of appellation classification, like Grand Cru or Premier Cru or Barolo, price and critical acclaim. These are all factors that play a part in every fine wine that you will come across. Intrinsic quality, what's in the glass, that's the most essential part of all good wines, of all great wines for sure. And wine tasters around the world will look at the concentration and the complexity of flavors and aromas within the wine. They'll look at the balance and the interplay of all the key components within that wine. They'll look at the length of time that these aromas and flavors play on the palate, and the typicity and the sense of place that the wine shows, and also its potential for development. If we look at the appellation system, this is being part of a protected designation of origin, and most countries have these in place, and they provide rules and regulations for the production of a basic level of quality, or an elevated level of quality in others, and potentially the highest level of quality. But playing by the rules doesn't necessarily mean you will make a great wine, and there are frequent examples of wines where the winemaker or the producer doesn't play by the rules at all. They throw that all to one side, and yet they become cult icons with a massive following, which everyone would happily describe as a fine wine. Fine wine might justify a higher price, but does just simply setting the price high for your wine guarantee that it will be described as a fine wine? No, not necessarily. Value is a relative concept here, because depending on how much you earn and how much enjoyment you get from spending money, that will depend on what value you will place on a wine, or whether you say it is good value or not. So we've got the ideas of intrinsic quality, the ideas of a designated region of origin or a designated quality classification, and price, all being important here, but not really helping us to define a fine wine, not getting us over the line to really say that something is a fine wine as typically accepted. I think the concept of fine wine transcends quality. It's frustratingly undefined and unregulated. And you can have fine wines which sell for 100 euros a case, and those that sell for 100,000 euros a case. So price is a tricky one to be able to pin it to. It appears that the defining factor for what is a fine wine is its potential to evolve over time in a good way, for a positive evolution, and a dynamic sale value. So this is where the price will change over time, which lends itself to trading on a secondary market. And it seems very much that it is this investment angle what defines a fine wine across the industry. We all have our different relative concepts, but it certainly is those wines which are traded on the big international trading platforms. It is those wines that have that potential for profit in the long term, thrive on the secondary market. The market has decided are fine wines. However much I am drawn to definitions like that of the Irani Global Institute, which describes fine wine as wine of quality, emotion, and an expression of truth. I think it's the investment angle which is the most accepted defining factor that sets fine wine apart from good wine and great wine. I think that the key takeaway here is that it is still a subjective and relative point. It isn't defined. For me personally, I think the focus should always be on enjoyment. So unless I'm purely investing, I put the emphasis on what's in the glass rather than on definitions. But I think it's still very important that we understand what goes into these definitions that are used, or these terms rather, that are used by our peers, by our colleagues, and by people in other parts of the industry. Now, I hope this shed some light, and I hope this answered a few more questions than it raised. But if you would like to get in touch, if you have any questions or comments or feedback, please do get in touch with me. And I thank you very much for your time.